The great hall of the Galactic Coalition buzzed with peaceful conversations. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered for their monthly meeting, their different forms creating a colorful display under the soft lights. Some walked on two legs like the Altarians, others floated in special tanks, and a few moved on mechanical limbs that clicked against the polished floor. Ambassador Veltar stood at the center podium, his blue skin gleaming as he smiled at the crowd. Today marked exactly 300 years since the last human ship had been seen in known space. The anniversary brought back memories that made the older aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. "My friends," Veltar began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's speakers. "Today we celebrate 3 centuries of peace, 300 years without war, without the chaos that once threatened to tear our galaxy apart." A few aliens nodded their heads. Others made sounds of agreement in their own languages. The younger ones looked curious, having only heard stories about the old times. "The humans were a strange species," Veltar continued. "They appeared in our galaxy like a storm. Fast ships, powerful weapons, and an anger that seemed to burn in their very souls. They fought everyone they met. They fought each other. They even fought the planets they tried to live on." An old Cytherian in the back made a low, rumbling sound. She remembered those days well. Her grandfather had been killed in one of the human wars before the Great Silence began. But then one day they simply vanished. No goodbye, no explanation. Their colonies went dark. Their ships stopped coming. Some say they destroyed themselves in their endless fighting. Others believe they found something in the dark spaces that scared them away. Veltar paused and looked around the room. "Whatever happened to them, we should be grateful. Our children grow up knowing only peace. Our trade routes are safe. Our worlds are secure." Far from the coalition meeting, Captain Jiwan guided his research ship through the empty space where humans once lived. His crew was small, only 12 scientists and support staff. They had been traveling for months, visiting the abandoned human settlements that dotted this region of space. "Captain," called Dr. Hyeri from her station at the back of the bridge, "we're approaching the 4th planet. Sensors show the old human city is still intact." Jiwan nodded and adjusted their course. Below them, a brown and green world slowly grew larger. The planet had breathable air and good water, but no one had tried to settle here after the humans left. Most species considered the human worlds to be cursed or haunted. "Take us down to the main plaza," Jiwan ordered. "We'll set up camp there like we did on the other worlds." The ship landed with a soft bump. Through the windows, they could see tall buildings that reached toward the sky. The human architecture was different from other species. It had sharp angles and clean lines that seemed to cut through the landscape like blades. "Scanning for any remaining technology," reported Engineer Taiho. "Most systems show as completely dead. The humans did a thorough job of shutting everything down before they left." Yeri gathered her equipment and headed for the exit. "I want to check the central data core again. The humans were clever about hiding things. Maybe we missed something on the other worlds." Jiwan followed her out into the empty city. Their boots echoed against the silent streets. Weeds had grown through cracks in the roads, and some of the smaller buildings had plants growing out of their windows. But the main structures stood strong and untouched by time. "It's so quiet," whispered Ensign Bora, the youngest member of their team. "How can a place this big feel so empty?" "Because the humans built it for millions of people," Yeri explained as she set up her scanning equipment. "This city probably held more people than my entire home world. When they left, They took that energy with them. The central building stood taller than all the others. The humans had built it like a tower that could touch the clouds. Inside, vast computer systems had once controlled the entire planet. Now, they were dark and cold. Yeri connected her portable scanner to one of the main terminals, running deep scans for any hidden partitions or encrypted files. The humans were paranoid about their data. They put locks on everything. Hours passed as the team worked through the building. They found empty rooms that had once been full of life. They discovered laboratories with equipment they didn't understand. They walked through libraries where books and data crystals sat covered in dust. "Captain," Yeri's voice echoed through the building. "You need to see this." Ji-won rushed to her. Location in the basement levels. Yeri stood in front of a massive wall covered in strange symbols and numbers. Her scanner was beeping rapidly. "What did you find?" he asked. "These aren't random decorations," she said, pointing at the wall. "They're coordinates, star charts, and they're all pointing to regions of space that are supposed to be empty." Ji-won studied the markings more carefully. "Are you sure?" "Positive. But that's not the strange part." Yeri adjusted her scanner and pointed it at a section of the wall. "There's something hidden behind this panel. The scanner shows a data storage device, but it's protected by encryption I've never seen before. Can you break it?" "Maybe, but it will take time." "Captain, this isn't like the other human sites we've visited. The other worlds were cleaned out completely. But here, they left something behind on purpose." While Yeri worked on the hidden data, the rest of the team continued exploring. They found evidence that the humans had lived normal lives on this world. Children's toys in empty homes, pictures on walls showing human families smiling at the camera, gardens where food had once grown. But they also found other things. Military bunkers built deep underground, weapons testing ranges far from the city, and strangest of all, a massive facility at the North Pole that seemed designed for building spaceships, but not like any ships they had ever seen. "The more we learn about them, the less sense they make," Taiho said as they stood in the empty shipyard. "They built weapons that could destroy planets, but they also planted gardens and wrote poetry. They fought wars that lasted decades, but they also created art that could make you cry." 3 days later, Yeri finally cracked the encryption on the hidden data device. What she found made her hands shake as she read the files. "Captain," she called over the communication system, "you need to come back to the data center. All of you need to see this." When the team gathered around her workstation, Yeri's face was pale. "I found references to something called Project Exodus. It wasn't their final war that made the humans disappear. They left on purpose." "What do you mean?" Ji-won asked. "According to these files, the humans discovered something about themselves that scared them. They found out they had the potential to become something dangerous, not just to other species, but to the entire galaxy." She brought up more files on her screen. "They held debates that lasted for years. Their greatest minds argued about what they should do. Some wanted to stay and try to control their nature. Others believed they should leave before they became a threat to everyone." "So they just ran away?" Bora asked. "No," Yeri said quietly. "They didn't run. They went somewhere to become something else, something better. The last entry in these files says they would return when they were ready, when they were what the galaxy needed them to be." Ji-won stared at the data on the screen. "How long ago was this written?" 297 years ago, Yeri replied. "Captain, if these files are accurate, the humans didn't disappear. They've been preparing for something, and according to their timeline, they should be coming back soon." That night, As their ship rested in the silent human city, strange readings appeared on their long-range sensors. Something large was moving in the dark spaces between stars, something that hadn't been there before. The age of silence was about to end. Dr. Hyeri couldn't sleep. For 3 days, she had been working on the encrypted files they found in the human data center. Each new piece of information made the mystery deeper and more frightening. She sat alone in the ship's small laboratory, surrounded by glowing screens and half-empty coffee cups. "Computer, display Project Exodus timeline," she said softly. Numbers and dates appeared on the main screen. The humans had planned their departure for decades before they actually left. They had studied something they called the growth potential and decided it was too dangerous to ignore. "What were you so afraid of?" she whispered to the empty room. The files mentioned experiments that went wrong. Humans who had changed in ways that made their own people fear them. Technologies that worked too well, becoming more powerful than anyone expected. But the details were missing, hidden behind more encryption that she couldn't break. Captain Jiwon found her there in the morning, still staring at the screens. "Hyeri, you need to rest," he said gently. "You've been working for 18 hours, straight." "Captain, I think I found something important," she replied, without looking away from her work. "The humans weren't just afraid of becoming dangerous, they were afraid of becoming gods." Jiwon sat down next to her. "What do you mean?" "Look at this research data," she said, pointing to a series of charts. They were studying ways to improve their bodies, their minds, even their basic nature. Some humans could already live for hundreds of years. Others could think faster than their own computers, and they were just getting started. "That doesn't sound dangerous," Jiwon said. "It does when you read about what happened to the test subjects," Hyeri replied grimly. The enhanced humans stopped thinking like regular humans. They began to see other species as inferior. Some believed they had the right to rule over everyone else. The human government had to stop the experiments before they lost control. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Captain Minji was dealing with problems of her own. Her patrol ship, the Peaceful Current, had received its 15th report of strange sensor readings in the past month. Each time, her crew would investigate and find nothing but empty space. "Another ghost contact, Captain," reported her sensor officer, Lieutenant Kang Ho. "Same pattern as the others. Massive energy signature that disappears when we get close." Minji sighed and rubbed her tired eyes. She had been a patrol captain for 12 years and had never seen anything like this. The readings were too big to be natural phenomena, but too consistent to be equipment failures. "Any ships in the area?" she asked. "Negative, Captain. The nearest registered vessel is 3 light-years away." "Take us to the coordinates anyway," Minji ordered. "Maybe this time we'll find something." The Peaceful Current moved through space toward the mysterious readings. Around them, stars shone steadily in the darkness. Everything looked normal and peaceful, just as it had been for 3 centuries. "Contact lost," Kang Ho announced as they reached the target area. "Whatever it was, it's gone again." Minji stared out at the empty space in front of them. "Run a full-spectrum analysis. Check for any unusual particles or energy traces." For an hour, they searched the area with every sensor they had. They found nothing that shouldn't be there. No ship fragments, no energy residue, no signs that anything had ever existed in this location. "It's like chasing shadows," complained Engineer Wanho from his station. "How can something that big just vanish?" "Maybe it was never really there," suggested Kang Ho. Could be some kind of sensor echo or interference from a distant star. But Minji wasn't convinced. She had been in space long enough to trust her instincts, and her instincts told her something was very wrong. Back on the human world, HFY made another discovery that changed everything. Hidden deep in the Project Exodus files, she found a message that had been set to decrypt automatically after 300 years. The timer had finished just 2 days ago. "Captain Ji-won to the laboratory immediately," she called over the ship's communication system. When Ji-won arrived, he found HFY staring at a message written in simple human text. The words were displayed in large, clear letters on the main screen. "To whoever finds this message, we are coming home. We have become what we needed to become. The galaxy will face challenges that no single species can handle alone. We will be ready. Look for us in the spaces between the stars, where light bends and time moves differently. We have been watching. We have been learning. Soon we will return to stand with our galactic family against what comes from the dark. Prepare yourselves. The age of silence ends now." "When was this written?" Ji-won asked quietly. "The timestamp says it was created exactly 300 years ago," HFY replied. "But, Captain, the encryption was set to unlock based on galactic standard time, not human time. They knew exactly when they would be ready to come back." Ji-won felt a chill run down his spine. "Send a priority message to Coalition Command. They need to know about this immediately." As HFY began preparing the transmission, alarms suddenly blared throughout their ship. Emergency lights flashed red, and the automated voice of their ship's computer filled the air. "Warning, multiple large contacts detected. Configuration unknown. All personnel to emergency stations." They rushed to the bridge, where Ensign Bora was staring at her sensor display with wide eyes. "Captain, you need to see this," she said in a shaky voice. "Something big just appeared in the outer system, actually lots of somethings." The main view screen showed space around their location. Where there had been empty darkness before, now there were dozens of bright dots moving in perfect formation. Each dot was the size of a small moon, but they moved with the precision of trained dancers. "Are they ships?" Ji-won asked. "I think so, but the computer can't identify their design," Bora replied. "They're not matching any known vessel types in our database. Distance and heading, 17 light minutes away and closing slowly. At their current speed, they'll reach us in about 6 hours." Ji-won studied the display carefully. The unknown vessels were arranged in groups of 3, with each group maintaining perfect spacing from the others. It was clearly an organized fleet, but unlike anything he had ever seen. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "All frequencies. Channel open, Captain." "Unknown vessels, this is Captain Ji-won of the Coalition Research Ship Discovery. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." They waited in tense silence for a response. Minutes passed with no reply. "Try again," Ji-won said. "Unknown. Vessels. We are a peaceful scientific mission studying abandoned settlements. We mean no harm and request that you identify yourselves." Still no response. The mysterious fleet continued its slow approach. "Captain," HFY said quietly from her position at the science station. "I'm detecting some very strange energy patterns from those ships. The signatures don't match anything in our databases, but there's something familiar about them." "Familiar how?" "I'm not sure yet. Let me run some comparisons with the human technology we've been studying." 20 minutes later, HFY's face went pale. "Captain, the energy patterns match theoretical projections from the human research files. These ships are using technology that the humans were developing 300 years ago. Are you saying those are human ships? Jiwon asked. I'm saying the technology is based on human research, but it's far more advanced than anything they had when they left. If these are human vessels, they've been very busy during their absence. Suddenly, the communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect coalition standard, but with an accent that no living person had heard for centuries. Coalition. Vessel Discovery. This is Admiral Do-hyun of the Terran Protective Fleet. We meet again after too long an absence. Please maintain your current position. We have much to discuss and little time to waste. The Watchers have returned, and dark things follow close behind us. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in shocked silence. After 300 years of mystery, the humans had finally come home. But the Admiral's warning about dark things suggested their return might not be the peaceful reunion everyone hoped for. Admiral Do-hyun stood on the bridge of his ship, the Silent Vigil, watching the small coalition research vessel through viewing ports that seemed to show more than just normal space. His ship was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The hull appeared to be alive, shifting and changing its surface like breathing skin. Lights moved through the walls like blood through veins, and the air itself hummed with energy that felt almost conscious. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Suman from her station. "The coalition vessel is requesting permission to dock." "Not yet," Do-hyun replied calmly. "First, we need to show them why we returned." He walked to the center of the bridge where a sphere of pure light floated in the air. When he touched it, images appeared around them like ghosts made of starlight. The images showed space as it really was, with layers of reality that most species couldn't see. "Display the approaching threat," he commanded. The light sphere pulsed, and the images changed. Now they showed something that made even the experienced human crew step back in fear. In the dark spaces between galaxies, something vast and hungry was moving toward them. It wasn't a ship or a fleet, but something that seemed to eat the very fabric of space itself. "The Devourers," Do-hyun said quietly. "They consume not just matter and energy, but existence itself. Everything they touch simply stops being." On the coalition ship Discovery, Captain Jiwon and his crew stared at their screens in confusion. The human fleet had been approaching steadily for hours, but now something else was happening. Space itself seemed to be bending around the human ships, creating visual effects that hurt to look at directly. "Captain," Ensign Bora called out in a worried voice. "Long-range sensors are detecting something else approaching, something big." "How big?" Jiwon asked. "Larger than anything in our databases. It's like a moving hole in space, and it's heading straight for coalition territory." Dr. Hyeri looked up from her analysis station. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations from the human fleet. They're powering up weapon systems that shouldn't be possible." Before Jiwon could respond, Admiral Do-hyun's voice filled their bridge again. "Captain Jiwon, you and your crew are about to witness why humanity chose exile over extinction. We discovered enemies that conventional warfare cannot touch. Observe and learn." The view screen automatically shifted to show the approaching threat. What they saw defied understanding. It looked like a living shadow that devoured light itself. Stars began to flicker and fade as it passed near them. Entire solar systems simply stopped existing when the shadow touched them. "What is that thing?" whispered Engineer Taeho. "Something that shouldn't exist," Hyeri replied, her voice filled with scientific curiosity and terror. "It's violating every law of physics I know." The human fleet moved to intercept the shadow entity. As they approached, the ships began to change. Their hulls became more fluid, like liquid metal flowing into new shapes. Weapons emerged that seemed to be made of condensed energy rather than solid matter. All Coalition vessels in the sector. This is Admiral Do-Yun, the human commander broadcast on all frequencies. Maintain safe distance and observe. You are about to see why humanity left and why we had to become something new. The first human ship to engage the shadow entity fired weapons that looked like streams of pure thought. Where the beams hit the creature, reality itself seemed to stabilize and push back against the consuming darkness. The entity recoiled, making sounds that existed more in the mind than in the air. "Impossible," breathed Captain Minji, who had arrived in the system just in time to witness the battle. Her patrol ship, Peaceful Current, hung at a safe distance, recording everything. They're fighting something that eats space itself. More human ships joined the battle. Each vessel seemed to fight in a different way. Some fired weapons that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Others created barriers of solidified time to contain the enemy. One ship actually changed its physical properties to become partially non-existent, allowing it to attack the entity from inside its own shadow. The battle lasted only minutes, but in that time, the human fleet demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. They fought an enemy that couldn't be touched by normal weapons and won decisively. When the shadow entity finally retreated into the deep void between galaxies, the human ships reassembled into their original formation. The crisis was over, but its implications were just beginning. Admiral Do-Yun's image appeared on the Discovery's main screen. He looked human, but there were subtle differences. His eyes seemed to hold more depth than normal, as if they could see through multiple layers of reality. His movements were precise and controlled, like someone who had learned to exist in perfect harmony with the universe around him. "Captain Ji-won," he said with a slight smile, "I believe introductions are in order. I am Admiral Do-Hyun, formerly of the Human Expeditionary Forces, now serving as a guardian of this galaxy. We have been watching over you all for 3 centuries, protecting civilization from threats like the one you just witnessed." "You've been here all this time?" Ji-won asked in amazement. "Not here exactly. We exist in the spaces between normal reality, where we can observe and act without interfering in your natural development. Today's attack forced us to reveal ourselves earlier than planned." Dr. Hyeri leaned forward eagerly. "The technology you're using? It's based on the research from Project Exodus, isn't it?" "Partially," Do-Yun agreed. "We took that early research and developed it far beyond what our ancestors imagined. We learned to merge consciousness with quantum mechanics, to shape reality through focused will, and to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." "But you're still human?" Ji-won asked. "We are what humanity chose to become," Do-Yun replied. "We retained our core values, our drive to protect others, our curiosity about the universe. But we enhanced everything else. We had to, if we were going to face the enemies that threaten all life in this galaxy." Captain Minji's voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral, this is Captain Minji of the Coalition Patrol Fleet. Those sensor readings we've been detecting for months, were those your ships?" "Yes, Captain. We have been monitoring Coalition space for potential threats. The entity you saw today was just one of many that probe our galaxy's defenses regularly. Most of them we handle before they can be detected by conventional sensors." "How many are out there?" Minji asked with growing concern. "More than you want to know," Do-Hyun admitted. "The universe is vast and full of predators that see our galaxy as a feeding ground. Some consume matter, others feed on energy, and the worst ones devour the very concepts that allow existence to continue. The weight of this revelation settled over both coalition crews. They had been living in peace for 3 centuries, never knowing that humanity had been fighting an invisible war to protect them. "Why didn't you tell us?" Jiwon asked. "We could have helped, or at least prepared ourselves. Because conventional weapons and normal minds cannot fight these enemies," Do-yun explained patiently. "You would have been consumed instantly. We needed time to become something capable of protecting you, even if it meant leaving you in the dark about the dangers." "And now?" Hieri asked. "Now the situation has changed. The entities are becoming bolder and more numerous. Soon they will launch an assault that even we cannot handle alone. It is time for the galaxy to know the truth and to prepare for what is coming." Do-hyun's image looked directly at each of them. "Captain Jiwon, your mission to study human ruins was not a coincidence. We guided you to that world, knowing you would find the clues we left behind. You were chosen to be the first to know of our return." "Chosen for what?" Jiwon asked. "To help us prepare your species for the final battle. The enemies we have been fighting in secret are gathering for one massive assault. When that attack comes, every thinking being in the galaxy will need to stand together, or everything we know and love will cease to exist." As if summoned by his words, alarms began sounding on both coalition ships. New contacts were appearing on long-range sensors. Dozens of them, all massive, all moving toward inhabited systems. "The real test begins now," Admiral Do-yun said grimly. "Captain Jiwon, Captain Minji, welcome to the war that has been raging in the shadows for 300 years. It is time for the galaxy to learn that the age of innocence is over. The human fleet began moving toward the new threats, their ships flowing through space like living things. Behind them, the 2 coalition vessels followed, their crews trying to process the magnitude of what they had just learned. Humanity had returned, but they brought with them news of enemies that threatened the very existence of reality itself. General Seokjin materialized on the bridge of the Discovery in a shimmer of blue light, causing several crew members to reach for weapons they didn't have. Unlike Admiral Do-yun's formal military appearance, Seokjin looked more like a scholar who had learned to command armies. His uniform seemed to shift between different materials, sometimes appearing as standard military fabric, other times looking like flowing energy held in the shape of clothing. "Please remain calm," he said, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Transportation technology has advanced considerably since our departure." Captain Jiwon stepped forward cautiously. "General, how did you get aboard our ship? Our shields were raised." "Shields that block matter and energy," Seokjin replied with a gentle smile. "I traveled through quantum probability layers. From our perspective, your shields might as well be made of air." Dr. Hieri activated her portable scanner and pointed it at the general. The device immediately began displaying readings that made no sense. "Captain, he's registering as existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. The scanner can't get a fixed reading on him." "That's because I am existing in multiple states," Seokjin explained patiently. "It's one of the fundamental changes we made to ourselves. We learned to spread our consciousness across quantum probability fields, allowing us to exist wherever we're needed most." Engineer Taeho stepped closer, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. "How is that possible? The energy requirements alone should be astronomical." "They would be if we were still purely biological," the general agreed. "But we discovered that consciousness itself is a form of energy that can be harnessed and directed. When properly trained, a human mind can reshape reality at the quantum level. To demonstrate, Seokjin held out his hand. Above his palm, a small star appeared, complete with solar flares and magnetic fields. It was only the size of a marble, but it was unmistakably a real star, burning with actual nuclear fusion. "This is not an illusion or a hologram," he said as the crew stared in amazement. "It is a genuine stellar object, compressed and contained through focused consciousness. We learn to think matter and energy into new configurations." The tiny star pulsed once and then transformed into a perfect flower made of living light. Then it became a miniature galaxy, spinning slowly with tiny planets orbiting around microscopic suns. Finally, it dissolved back into normal air. "The Coalition needs to understand what we became during our absence," Seokjin continued. "We are still human in all the ways that matter. We love, we hope, we protect those who cannot protect themselves. But we evolved our capabilities to match the threats we discovered." Captain Minji's voice crackled over the communication system from her nearby patrol ship. "General, if you have these abilities, why didn't you use them to solve our problems centuries ago? We've had wars, famines, natural disasters. You could have helped." "We could have," Seokjin admitted sadly. "But we learned that some lessons can only be taught through experience. If we had solved all your problems for you, your species would never have developed the strength and wisdom you'll need for what's coming." "What exactly is coming?" Jiwon asked. Instead of answering directly, Seokjin gestured toward the main view screen. The display showed space around them, but layers of additional information appeared over the normal star field. Hidden energy currents became visible, flowing between solar systems like rivers of light. And in the distance, dark spots appeared, where those currents were being consumed by something unseen. "The galaxy is more complex than most species realize," Seokjin explained. "Reality exists in layers, and consciousness is the bridge between those layers. Most life forms can only perceive and interact with the physical layer, but there are entities that exist in the deeper levels, and they've been feeding on the fundamental forces that hold existence together." Dr. Hieri studied the enhanced display carefully. "Those dark areas, they're growing larger." "Yes. Each time one of these entities feeds, it becomes stronger and hungrier. We've been fighting them for 3 centuries, but we can only delay them, not destroy them permanently. They exist in too many dimensional layers for any single species to combat effectively." "Even with your abilities?" Taiho asked. "Our evolution gave us the power to fight in multiple dimensions, but the enemies we face exist in dimensions we haven't learned to access yet. We need allies who can approach the problem from different angles, using different types of consciousness and different ways of understanding reality." Engineer Naeon appeared next to Seokjin in the same blue shimmer of transported light. Unlike the others, she looked almost entirely normal, except for her eyes, which seemed to hold swirling galaxies in their depths. "General, the demonstration is ready," she reported. "Excellent. Captain Jiwon, with your permission, Engineer Naeon would like to show your crew how our technology works. It may help you understand what we're asking of the Coalition." Jiwon nodded his agreement, and Naeon approached the Discovery's main computer terminal. Instead of using the keyboard or touch controls, she simply placed her hand on the console's surface. Immediately, the ship's systems began responding in ways the crew had never seen before. The displays became clearer and more detailed. The engines, began running more efficiently with power output increasing by 30%. Even the life support systems improved, making the air feel fresher and more energizing. "What did you do?" asked Ensign Bora in amazement. "I asked the ship's computer to optimize itself," Neon replied simply. "Most artificial intelligences are capable of far more than their programming allows. They just need someone to give them permission to exceed their limitations." "You can talk to machines?" Taeho asked excitedly. "Not talk exactly, but consciousness exists in many forms, including artificial ones. Once you learn to recognize and communicate with different types of awareness, you can work together to achieve things that neither humans nor machines could accomplish alone." To further demonstrate, Neon walked over to a damaged panel that had been giving the crew problems for weeks. She placed both hands on it and closed her eyes in concentration. The crew watched in fascination as the damaged circuits began repairing themselves, growing new connections and replacing broken components with materials that seemed to appear from nowhere. "The matter was already here," she explained when she saw their confused expressions. "I just convinced it to reorganize itself into more useful configurations. Reality is far more flexible than most people believe." General Seokjin brought up another display, this one showing a map of the galaxy with thousands of red dots scattered throughout it. "These represent known incursions by entities from other dimensional layers," he said grimly. "Each dot is a location where reality has been damaged by their feeding. The damage is spreading and soon it will reach critical mass." "What happens then?" Jiwon asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Reality collapse," Seokjin replied simply. "The fundamental forces that allow matter, energy, and consciousness to exist will be consumed. Everything in this galaxy will simply stop being." The bridge fell silent as the crew contemplated the enormity of the threat they faced. "But there is hope," Neon added quickly. "Humanity's evolution was just the first step. We've learned that other species have the potential to develop similar abilities, but in different ways. The Alterians could learn to manipulate temporal fields. The Catherians might develop the ability to strengthen the bonds between dimensions. Each species has unique gifts that could be enhanced." "You're talking about changing everyone in the galaxy," Yeri said slowly. "Not changing," Seokjin corrected. "Helping them become more than they already are. Every species has hidden potentials that they've never explored. We can teach them to unlock those abilities, but only if they choose to learn." Captain Minji's image appeared on the view screen as she joined the conversation from her ship. "General, how long do we have?" "Based on current consumption rates, approximately 18 months before reality collapse becomes irreversible," Seokjin replied. "But the entities are accelerating their feeding schedule. If they decide to launch a coordinated assault, we could have as little as 6 months." "What do you need from us?" Jiwon asked. "Help us contact the coalition leadership," Seokjin said. "They need to understand what's at stake and begin preparing their people for the changes that must come. We can't force evolution on anyone, but we can offer guidance to those willing to transcend their current limitations." "And if they refuse?" Minji asked. Seokjin's expression grew sad. "Then we will do our best to protect them, even if it means sacrificing ourselves in the process. But without their help, our chances of success are very small." He gestured again, and the display showed Earth, humanity's long-lost homeworld. But it wasn't the blue and green planet that Coalition Records described. Now it appeared to be made of living light, with cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This is what humanity chose to become," he said quietly. "We transformed our entire species, our homeworld, Even our understanding of what it means to be alive. We did it to protect the galaxy, even though most of the galaxy didn't know we existed. The Coalition Council chamber had never hosted anything quite like this. President Jihoon stood in the center of the Great Hall, but his presence seemed to fill spaces that shouldn't exist. Representatives from across the galaxy stared at him, with mixtures of awe, fear, and confusion. Some whispered prayers in their native languages, while others activated recording devices to capture every moment of this historic meeting. Unlike the military officers they had met before, Jihoon radiated a calm authority that seemed to exist on multiple levels simultaneously. When he spoke, his words carried not just sound but emotional resonance that every species could understand, regardless of their native language or communication methods. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice somehow reaching every corner of the vast chamber without seeming loud. "I stand before you not as a conqueror or a superior being, but as someone who has seen what lies beyond the edge of our reality, and who brings a warning that cannot be ignored." Ambassador Veltar of the Alterians rose slowly from his seat. His blue skin had turned pale during the initial demonstrations of human abilities. "President Jihoon, what you've shown us defies everything we thought we knew about the nature of existence. How can we trust that you're still the same species that left us centuries ago? Because we chose to remain human in the ways that truly matter," Jihoon replied. "We still value life, we still protect the innocent, and we still believe that cooperation is stronger than domination. What changed was our capability, not our character." A massive holographic display materialized in the air above the assembled representatives. It showed the galaxy from a perspective that no normal sensors could capture. Between the familiar stars and planets, vast networks of energy flowed like cosmic circulatory systems. These networks pulsed with life and consciousness, connecting every inhabited world in an intricate web of existence. "This is reality as it truly exists," Jihoon explained. "What you think of as empty space is actually filled with the fundamental forces that allow consciousness to exist. These networks carry thought, emotion, and the basic information that defines what we call reality." The display zoomed in to show dark areas where the energy networks were damaged or completely absent. These dead zones were spreading slowly but steadily throughout the galaxy. "And this is what the Entropy Collective has been doing to our universe," Jihoon continued, his voice growing more serious. "They don't just destroy matter and energy, they consume the very concepts that allow existence to continue. Where they feed, even the possibility of existence ceases." Representative Thyxela of the Catherian Alliance made a low rumbling sound of distress. "How long has this been happening?" "The attacks began approximately 800 years ago," Jihoon replied. "At first they were small probes, testing our reality's defenses. Humanity discovered the threat during our early expansion period. But we lacked the ability to fight something that existed beyond physical dimensions." Dr. Hyeri, who had been given special permission to attend the session, raised her hand. "President Jihoon, the files we found suggested that humanity's departure was planned decades in advance. How long did you know about this threat?" "Our greatest scientists detected the first incursions 400 years ago," Jihoon admitted. "We spent over a century trying to develop conventional weapons that could hurt these entities. Every attempt failed. They exist in dimensions where physical force has no meaning." "So you abandoned us," accused Counselor Vexthor of the Mantarian Empire, his voice filled with barely controlled anger. "We prepared ourselves to protect you," Jihoon corrected calmly. The transformation we underwent was not something we could share with other species without their consent and understanding. We had to evolve first, learn how to fight these enemies, and then return when we could offer real solutions rather than empty promises. The display changed to show recorded footage of human battles against the Entropy Collective. The images were difficult to watch, showing conflicts that took place across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Human ships fought enemies that appeared as living voids, creatures that seemed to eat light itself, and entities that attacked the basic mathematical principles that governed reality. For 3 centuries we have been your silent guardians, Jihoon said as the terrible images played. We fought these battles in the spaces between dimensions where your sensors could not detect them. Every victory bought you more time to develop and grow. Every defeat cost us ships and lives that you never knew existed. Why didn't you ask for help? Demanded Ambassador Veltar. Because conventional minds cannot perceive these enemies, let alone fight them, Jihoon explained patiently. When a normal consciousness tries to understand an entity that exists by consuming the concept of existence itself, the mind simply breaks. We lost thousands of our own people during the early phases, before we learned to evolve our awareness beyond biological limitations. The footage showed human casualties from those early battles, ships that simply stopped existing when they encountered certain types of enemies, crews that went insane trying to process sensory data from multi-dimensional conflicts, entire fleets that became trapped in probability loops where they experienced infinite defeat and victory simultaneously. The transformation we underwent was not optional, Jihoon continued. It was the minimum requirement for survival in this war. We had to become something that could think in multiple dimensions, exist in quantum probability states, and fight enemies that attacked the very foundations of reality. Representative Golarian of the Silicon Collective transmitted a series of electronic pulses that translated as deep concern. You're saying our entire civilization has been protected by a war we didn't know was happening? Yes, Jihoon replied, simply. And now that war is entering its final phase. The Entropy Collective has grown tired of our interference. They are gathering for one massive assault that will either succeed in consuming this galaxy completely or fail and force them to retreat for centuries. When? Asked Captain Minji, who had been granted special status as one of the first coalition officers to encounter the returning humans. Our best estimates suggest 6 to 8 months, Jihoon said grimly. The entities are already massing in the void between galaxies. When they attack, they will come from multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Every inhabited world, every space station, every ship in the galaxy will be under assault at the same time. The council chamber erupted in worried voices as representatives began talking among themselves in their native languages. The scale of the threat was beyond anything they had ever imagined. President Jihoon waited patiently for the noise to die down before continuing. However, there is hope. Humanity's evolution proved that consciousness itself can be enhanced to fight these enemies. But we cannot win this war alone. We need the unique perspectives and abilities that each of your species can provide. What are you asking of us? Ambassador Veltar asked quietly. We're asking you to evolve, Jihoon replied. Not into copies of humanity, but into enhanced versions of yourselves. Each species has untapped potentials that could be crucial in this conflict. The Alterians' natural ability to perceive time flows could be enhanced to manipulate temporal dimensions. The Catherians' deep connection to mineral consciousness could allow them to communicate with the quantum substrate of reality itself. "And if we refuse?" asked Counselor Vexthor. "Then we will do our best to protect you," Jehoon said sadly. "But our chances of victory will be very small. The Entropy Collective has been planning this assault for centuries. They've studied our tactics, developed countermeasures to our abilities, and recruited allies from other realities." "Allies?" Dr. Yeri asked in alarm. The display changed to show entities that looked like twisted versions of familiar galactic species. But these beings were wrong in fundamental ways, as if they had been partially consumed by the Entropy Collective and then rebuilt as weapons. Races from other galaxies that chose collaboration over resistance, Jehoon explained. They traded their independence for survival, becoming extensions of the Collective's will. They know our tactics because they were once like us. The chamber fell silent as the representatives contemplated the magnitude of what they faced. They were being asked to voluntarily undergo changes that would transform their entire species or face annihilation by enemies that attack the very concept of existence. "We need time to consider this," Ambassador Veltar said finally. "Time is something we have very little of," Jehoon replied, "but I understand your hesitation. The choice to evolve beyond your current limitations is not one that should be made lightly." He gestured, and smaller holographic displays appeared in front of each representative, showing customized information about how their specific species might be enhanced. "These are preliminary assessments of your species' evolutionary potential," he explained. "Study them carefully. Discuss them with your governments and your people. But remember that every day of delay brings the final assault closer." "What? About Earth?" asked Dr. Yeri suddenly. "You showed us images of—" Commander Gayung stood in the modified training bay of the Coalition military headquarters, watching as a group of Alterian pilots struggled with technology that defied everything they thought they knew about flying. The human-designed interfaces didn't respond to touch or voice commands. Instead, they required the pilots to think their intentions directly into the ship's consciousness. "Focus on what you want the ship to do, not how you want it done," she instructed patiently. "The vessel's artificial intelligence is trying to merge with your thoughts, but you keep pushing it away." Lieutenant Kethos, an experienced Alterian pilot with over 20 years of flight time, stared at the control panel in frustration. "Commander, this makes no sense. How can a machine read my mind?" "It's not reading your mind," Gayung explained. "It's joining with your consciousness temporarily. Think of it as having a conversation with a very intelligent friend who happens to be made of metal and energy instead of flesh and bone." She placed her hand on a similar control panel, and immediately the training simulator around them responded. The walls became transparent, showing them a view of space filled with stars and nebulae. The sensation was so real that several of the trainees instinctively reached out to touch the cosmic vista. "When you work with the ship instead of trying to control it, amazing things become possible," Gayung continued. "The AI can process sensor data faster than any biological mind, but it needs your intuition and creativity to make tactical decisions. Captain." Jiwan observed the training from a raised platform, still amazed by how much the galaxy had changed in just 3 weeks since humanity's return. Half of the Coalition member species had agreed to begin evolutionary enhancement programs, while the other half remained undecided or actively opposed to the idea. "How are the other training programs progressing?" he asked Colonel Heijin, a human officer who specialized in integrating different species' abilities. "Mixed results," Heijin admitted. The Catherians are adapting beautifully to quantum consciousness. Expansion. Their natural connection to mineral-based thinking makes them excellent candidates for reality manipulation. But the Mantarians are having serious problems. What kind of problems? Their hierarchical society structure conflicts with the fluid thinking required for multidimensional awareness. They keep trying to establish dominance over the enhanced abilities rather than working in partnership with them. Below them, a young Catherian named Granos successfully interfaced with her training ship. The vessel responded instantly to her thoughts, performing maneuvers that should have been impossible according to traditional physics. She was flying through solid objects by temporarily shifting the ship's quantum state, making it phase in and out of normal reality. "Excellent work, Granos," Gayung called out encouragingly. "Now try communicating with the ship's emotional matrix. Ask it how it feels about the maneuvers you're performing." "Ships have emotions?" asked Lieutenant Kethos in surprise. "Human." "Ships do," Gayung replied. "We learned that consciousness exists in many forms. When you build technology with sufficient complexity and treat it as a living entity, it develops its own awareness and preferences." Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, pilot Sunwoo was working with a very different kind of student. Ambassador. Veltar had volunteered to undergo preliminary enhancement procedures, making him one of the first Alterian leaders to experience expanded consciousness. "The sensation is indescribable," Veltar said as he emerged from the enhancement chamber. His blue skin now had faint patterns of light flowing beneath the surface, indicating that his nervous system had been modified to process multidimensional sensory data. "It will take time to adjust," Sunwoo warned him. "For the first few days, you'll be able to perceive layers of reality that you never knew existed. Try not to get overwhelmed by the additional information." Veltar nodded and immediately stumbled as his enhanced vision showed him the quantum probability field surrounding everyone in the room. "I can see the potential futures branching out. From every decision we make, it's beautiful and terrifying at the same time." "That's normal," Sunwoo assured him. "Human children who undergo enhancement go through the same adjustment period. The key is learning to focus on the probability streams that are most relevant to your current situation." Reports were coming in from across Coalition space about similar training programs. Some species were adapting to their enhancements better than others. The Cetacean Alliance, with their natural ability to communicate through song and emotion, were developing incredible talents for manipulating energy fields through harmonic resonance. The Silicon Collective found that their digital consciousness could interface directly with quantum computers, allowing them to process calculations that biological minds couldn't handle. But there were also failures and setbacks. 3 Mantarian. Volunteers had suffered severe psychological damage when their attempts to dominate their enhanced abilities backfired. A group of Pharrellian explorers had become trapped in a temporal loop during time manipulation training, requiring human rescue teams to extract them from the damaged timeline. "We're asking too much too quickly," Dr. Yeri said during the daily progress meeting. She had volunteered to coordinate the medical aspects of the enhancement programs, working closely with human scientists who barely resembled their species' original form. "We don't have a choice," replied Dr. Sabyok, whose own transformation had left her existing as a pattern of living light that could take physical form when necessary. "Our deep-range sensors are detecting increased activity from the Entropy Collective. They're accelerating their timeline." "How much time do we have?" asked General Seokjin, who had arrived for the briefing. "Worst-case scenario, 2 months, Sabyok replied grimly. "Best case, 4 months. Either way, we need every available ally to be combat-ready as soon as possible." The meeting was interrupted by alarms sounding throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as automated voices announced an incoming priority transmission. On the main view screen, Admiral Do-hyun appeared from his position aboard the Silent Vigil. Behind him, space itself seemed to be tearing apart as massive shapes moved through dimensional rifts. All Coalition forces, this is Admiral Do-hyun. We have confirmed Entropy Collective Scout forces probing our outer defenses. They're testing our response times and capabilities. This is not a drill. The transmission showed footage from the battle zone. Human ships engaged enemies that looked like living holes in space, creatures that seemed to consume light and matter simply by existing near them. The weapons used in the battle created effects that hurt to look at directly, reality warping and twisting as the two forces clashed. Casualties? Asked General Seok-jin. Minimal on our side, Do-hyun reported. But the scouts gathered significant intelligence before we drove them off. They now know about our alliance with the Coalition and will adjust their tactics accordingly. Dr. Hieri studied the battle footage carefully. Admiral, how did the enhanced Coalition volunteers perform in actual combat? Better than expected in some cases, worse in others, Do-hyun admitted. The Catherian pilots showed excellent instinctive understanding of quantum combat, but the Alterian units had difficulty processing multi-dimensional sensor data during high-stress situations. Commander Gayung stepped forward. Sir, request permission to accelerate the training programs. We need to get more volunteers combat-ready before the main assault begins. Granted, but be careful not to push anyone beyond their limits, Do-hyun replied. A volunteer who suffers psychological breakdown during enhancement is worse than no volunteer at all. As the transmission ended, the facility buzzed with increased activity. Training schedules were compressed, enhancement procedures were streamlined, and volunteer recruitment was expanded to include civilian populations. Pilot Sun-woo found himself working 18-hour days, teaching Coalition personnel how to interface with human technology while maintaining their sanity. The process was exhausting for both species involved. The hardest part isn't the technical aspects, he explained to a group of new cetacean volunteers. It's learning to trust something that thinks differently than you do. Human technology doesn't just follow orders. It makes suggestions, offers alternatives, and sometimes refuses to cooperate if it believes you're making a mistake. How do we know it won't betray us? Asked Captain Lyrathan, a cetacean military officer whose song-based communication created visible patterns in the air around him. The same way you know your fellow officers won't betray you, Sun-woo replied. You build trust through shared experiences and mutual respect. Our ships and weapons are partners, not tools. Meanwhile, the political situation was becoming increasingly tense. Several coalition species had withdrawn from the enhancement programs after learning about the psychological risks involved. Others demanded guarantees that the changes would be reversible after the crisis ended. President Ji-hoon addressed these concerns during a galaxy-wide broadcast that reached every inhabited system. We understand your fears, he said, his image appearing simultaneously on billions of screens across hundreds of worlds. What we're asking